Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to the Global Faculty Development Committee for funding this pedagogical project, and to Professor Hiro Saito for organizing today's talk. The goal of this project was to deepen students' understanding of rhetorical strategies and enhance their ability to apply them in both academic and public communication contexts. So by analyzing Donald Trump's social media posts, particularly his rhetorical use of platforms like X, formerly Twitter, as well as Truth Social, students in my first year academic oral communication courses explored persuasion, bias, and rhetoric in shaping discourse. This project not only aimed to improve rhetorical skills, but also encourage self-reflection on students' own communication practices. So in this about teaching academic oral communication through social media posts, I will outline the activities, the outcomes, and the impact of this project on students' academic growth and awareness. So this pedagogical project was implemented during the 2024 autumn semester as part of a fluency-oriented workshop, or as we call it here, FLOW, which is a 7-week academic oral communication course that is required of all first-year students here at the University of Tokyo. So this course is designed to help students improve their academic spoken English and become autonomous learners through group-based communication activities. Now, given that 2024 was an election year in the United States, I decided to incorporate an analysis of Donald Trump's social media rhetoric to increase student engagement with the course content. The focus on a real-world controversial figure whose use of rhetorical strategies has a wide political and media impact allowed students to critically examine how rhetoric functions in public discourse. By evaluating Trump's social media posts, students learned how language can be used to persuade, manipulate, as well as construct narratives, thus gaining valuable insights into their own communication practices. Now, to answer the question of why we should incorporate rhetorical analysis into an academic oral communication course, and more specifically, how students can develop an awareness of their own discursive practices by analyzing Donald Trump's social media posts, it's important to first define what we understand by rhetoric. Rhetoric is the art of using language effectively and persuasively. It involves employing various techniques and strategies to communicate ideas, influence an audience, and achieve a specific purpose. But one thing that I want to highlight is that rhetoric is not just about convincing others. It's also about how we structure our arguments, appeal to emotions, use logic, and adapt our communication to fit different contexts and audiences. So by analyzing Donald Trump's social media posts, I wanted my students to gain a hands-on understanding of how those rhetorical strategies are used in practice. And through this series of activities, I wanted them to identify key rhetorical appeals, such as ethos, which is credibility, logos, logical reasoning, and pathos, appeal to emotions. And I wanted them to see how they can be employed to engage and persuade audiences. Beyond these core strategies, I also wanted my students to learn how to recognize additional rhetorical devices such as repetition, framing, and hyperbole, all of which play a critical role in shaping discourse. Trump's social media, with its distinct style and often polarizing language, provides concrete examples of how students can dissect this kind of content, offering a rich context for examining how language is used to influence public opinion. Now, I also wanted this exercise to help students see how social media can function as a primary source for academic research. Social media posts are unique in their immediacy and directness, offering a snapshot of public discourse in real time. By analyzing these posts, I wanted students to explore how speed and brevity of social media communication can both shape and reflect larger societal conversations. So in this sense, social media becomes not just a source of entertainment or personal expression, but also a valuable tool for academic inquiry. Now, Perhaps the most important, I wanted this activity to foster a deeper understanding of my students' own discursive practices. As they analyzed Trump's posts, I wanted students to reflect on their own use of language and communication strategies, gaining insight into how they influence, persuade, and connect with different audiences. This type of reflection encourages my students to think critically about their choices, whether in tone, structure, or style, and how these choices impact their audience. So by becoming more attuned to these subtleties, my students gained a better understanding of how language could shape meaning and how they could leverage rhetorical techniques to strengthen their arguments or engage listeners more effectively in their own work. So the question becomes, why focus specifically on Donald Trump's social media rhetoric? Well, there are a few reasons. The first one being that scholars have pointed out Donald Trump's ability to craft persuasive narratives that resonate with larger audiences. So in this regard, Trump is regarded as a skilled and influential communicator. For example, Michael Humphrey's analysis of Trump's social media posts highlights his use of a consistent storytelling structure that has proven effective in shaping public discourse. Similarly, communication scholar Jennifer Mercieka, who has studied Trump's rhetorical techniques extensively, has described him as a quote-unquote rhetorical genius. And she argues that while his rhetoric is often divisive and controversial, it is highly effective in advancing his political objectives and engaging his audience. I also wanted my students to understand that by analyzing Trump's social media posts, they would be able to explore how he constructs persuasive narratives. My students could examine how Trump consistently used themes, storytelling structures, and the rescripting of existing narratives to shape public perception and advance his own political agenda. And in addition to the political content of Trump's rhetoric, studies have shown that platforms like Twitter play an important role in promoting rhetorical and genre awareness. So for instance, research by Hatem and Lomika highlights how social media platforms encourage users to refine their rhetorical strategies as they engage with diverse audiences. And finally, I was actually quite lucky with the timing of this activity, which occurred during the 2024 presidential elections. With Trump's social media posts constantly in the news, my students were already familiar with the political climate in the United States, and this familiarity provided context for their analysis, making this exercise more relevant and engaging to them. So let me explain a little bit how students, the series of in-class activities that I had students do over a 3-week period. So students began by learning the principles of rhetorical analysis and applying them to a satirical video from the US sitcom The Simpsons. And in this satirical video, this video actually lampoons Donald Trump's presidential campaign launch. After conducting a rhetorical analysis of this video, I had my students analyze the 2024 Trump campaign ad Nonsense, which claims that Vice President Kamala Harris supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners and illegal aliens. So through this analysis, students explored how rhetorical strategies like emotional appeals and authority are used to influence public perception, evoking fear and outrage to shape Trump's narrative. And these initial activities actually equipped students with the skills to critically assess visual and audio sources, preparing them for a more complex analysis in the next activity, which was an analysis of Trump's social media posts. So building on their foundational understanding of rhetorical concepts, students analyzed social media posts from both the Trump Twitter archive and Truth Social. In groups, They first selected a topic that was related to Trump's political rise or presidency, such as the border wall, the COVID-19 pandemic, climate change. I even had a group that talked about Trump's relationship with Shinzo Abe. And so after selecting their topic, the groups searched both platforms for relevant posts. The Trump Twitter archive, which is a comprehensive database of all tweets from Donald Trump from 2009 to the present, allowed students to analyze his posts by date, keyword, or theme, offering valuable insights into his communication style and political messaging. Now, I want to point out a key caveat about the Trump Twitter archive. Trump no longer uses the platform X, which was formerly Twitter, as frequently as he did during his first term in office. So after his account was suspended following the January 6 Capitol riots, Trump launched his own platform, Truth Social, and now he primarily uses Truth Social and only occasionally posts on X, which is formerly Twitter. Keep in mind that his account on X was reactivated once Elon Musk bought Twitter and changed the name to X. So because of this, depending on the topics that the students selected, I also encouraged them to explore Trump's posts on Truth Social to be able to gain a more comprehensive view of his rhetoric. So as students were exploring Truth Social and the Trump Twitter archive, they selected 5 tweets on their topic and analyzed them to understand Trump's purpose, language, and use of rhetorical devices. Using guiding questions, students assessed the post's relevance, authorship, context, purpose, and biases. And this step also involved examining how Trump used language, how he appealed to emotion, and how he presented facts and statistics. Once they were finished analyzing Trump's tweets, I had them compare the tweets to news articles. So what I had students do was I had them select news articles on their topic from media outlets that they considered reputable and trustworthy. As they analyzed the articles, my students focused on the reporting style, potential biases, viewpoints, sources, and the overall tone. In the final comparison between the social media posts and the news articles, I wanted students to identify similarities, differences, omissions, and the credibility of both sources. And my goal here was to have students understand that news articles are not neutral or objective, but are influenced by the perspectives and agendas of the media outlets and journalists that produce them. And in this regard, my background as a journalist was actually very helpful in conveying these ideas to my students. And finally, once they were finished with their comparison and analysis, students then used their analysis of the social media posts and news articles to craft a cohesive argument, synthesizing evidence from both sources to support their claim. They then presented their arguments in class and engaged in peer feedback through Q&A sessions, gaining insight into how rhetorical strategies function in both social media as well as academic contexts. So through the course activities, students developed essential skills in fact-checking and critically evaluating sources, particularly when it comes to the use of statistics. So one of the things that I did at the end of the activity, I had students do a reflection using guided questions that I provided them. And they provided me with a lot of very interesting insights. I'm not going to share all the insights. I'm going to share a few insights with you. Like, for instance, many reflected on how important it is to compare information from multiple sources, noting how Trump often used statistics in ways that can be misleading or selective. So in this regard, they, to a certain extent, understood how to develop their skills in fact-checking and recognizing biases. So for instance, as you can see on this slide, one student reflected on the importance of understanding context when evaluating social media posts, noting that certain posts, particularly those related to immigration statistics, which was his topic, can be misleading if taken out of context. These insights demonstrate demonstrate how students were developing critical information literacy skills, a crucial ability given the widespread misinformation on social media. Research from scholars like Sam Weinberg at Stanford highlights that many college students, despite being technologically savvy, struggle to assess the credibility of online information. So in this context, academic communication courses such as Flow have an important role to play in improving students' ability to discern reliable information. And this was another of the key goals of incorporating rhetorical analysis into my course. I just want to provide you a couple more student reflections. One of the things that struck me was how students came to recognize social media as a valuable primary source for academic research, particularly when studying public opinion, rhetoric, and the ways in which people describe events in their own words. So for instance, as you can see in the slide, one student shared, I used to think biased sources like social media were not good for academic purposes, that it was just entertainment, but I learned it could be used for research if it is used properly, end quote. Additionally, students developed a deeper understanding of how shifts in rhetoric can reflect changing perspectives on issues over a certain period of time. So this process actually helped students grasp that information is rarely black and white. Instead, it exists on a spectrum with different biases and viewpoints influencing how we interpret and present the world. Now, while this project was very successful in fostering critical thinking and rhetorical analysis, there were actually a few challenges. One of the most significant one was the difficulty that students faced in identifying subtle biases within Trump's posts. Now, what do I mean by that? While overt biases are often easy to spot, more nuanced biases can be much harder to detect, especially when they're wrapped in persuasive language or mixed with seemingly factual information. Students had to engage in careful analysis and critical thinking to uncover the underlying intent behind certain words or phrases, requiring them to consider not just the content of the posts, but also the broader social and political context in which they were made. And here, this is something that I highlighted to my students, that information is a product of its time. So you need to keep in mind what the broader social and political contexts are in which the text or video was produced. Another challenge that students faced was the volume of available material for analysis. Given the vast number of tweets on the Trump Twitter archive, there are about, I looked this morning, about 80,000 tweets, and also his Truth Social posts. Students sometimes found it very difficult to select relevant content that directly supported their analysis. They also had a very hard time narrowing down the five tweets, the 5 posts that they were going to use. This process actually required students to not only be selective in their sources, but also to evaluate them more deeply. And finally, and this was something that I noticed, not so much in the student reflections, but in the student presentations, was that despite being introduced to the concept of media bias, a few students still viewed mainstream news outlets as neutral or objective. So some students during the presentation referred to these outlets as neutral or objective. So to me, this indicated a need for further discussion about the role of the media in shaping public discourse, as well as media bias. So I just want to point out a few concluding thoughts, and then we can open it up for Q&A. So for me, a rhetorical approach to academic oral communication offers significant benefits, as can be seen in the student reflections, particularly in the context of an election year, where language and persuasion played pivotal roles in shaping public discourse. By becoming more attuned to their own discursive practices and rhetorical strategies, my students gained critical insights into how language can be used to influence, persuade, and communicate effectively across various contexts. Reflecting on their communication styles, they developed a deeper understanding on how their choices in tone, structure, and style impact their audience, enabling them to tailor their messages for greater resonance and impact. And this ability to critically analyze and deploy rhetorical strategies equips students to navigate and respond to persuasive messages with greater sophistication and prepares them to engage critically with the complexities of today's digital landscape that is unfortunately littered with misinformation. Thank you very much.